recording in place? Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. In that case, we are starting with the agenda, and the first part of the agenda is to receive apologies from absence from committee members. Can I ask for those apologies, please?
Councillor Bennett, Councillor Banyard,
That's Councillor Bennett, Councillor Banyard,
and Councillor Williams.
and Councillor Williams. Thank you very much. We then move on to the minutes of the previous meeting. Members, you have had those minutes circulated to you. Can I ask members who are present to indicate whether they accept those as a true record, or whether they have any questions or alterations relating to them? I have a proposal that those are a true record. Councillor Mitchell, thank you. A seconder from Councillor Pole. And just a general indication from those present that those are accurate. Thank you very much. Those are now entered into the record, and I will sign them when appropriate. Declarations of interest. Councillors are reminded of the need to declare any disclosable pecuniary interests that relate to business on the agenda. I am not aware of anybody who has a disclosable pecuniary interest in this, and we are therefore proceeding on that basis. Local government, this is item 4, the exclusion of the press. This is a public open meeting. It is being recorded, and therefore I see absolutely no reason at all to call for the exclusion of the press and public. We are then moving on to item number 5, which is the land adjacent Marsh Barton train station, Clapperbrook Lane, and we are moving to public speaking. My first speaker on my list is a objector, and that is a Mr. Keith Lewis from Exeter Civic Society. Can I ask Mr. Lewis to approach, please? Thank you, Mr. Lewis. We will not start timing until after you've started, and please get comfortable and start when you wish. On the right-hand side of the device in front of you, you press the microphone to start, and that means that your voice can be recorded and heard by others outside the room. Okay. Thank you very much, Mr.
Lewis. This statement represents the concerns of Exeter Civic Society and Chris Pope, an Exeter resident. The Society is opposed to this development in this location. The Riverside Valley Park is public open space for the enjoyment of residents, but this proposal will occupy half of Grace Road Field and blight the other half with noise pollution and views of this huge industrial building. The Water Lane SPD lists many social uses for the field, but are now unlikely to happen. The proposed use of Grace Road Fields overturns previous planning policy highlighted in Councillor Moore's submission, which I hope you have read. The loss of the field will reduce available green space for recreation use of a growing population, with nearly 10,000 new homes planned to support the Exeter plan, including 1,800 homes at Water Lane and about 20,000 more people by the year 2040. If you allow this loss of green open space, it will have a negative impact upon people's recreation. One energy's justification for this site is the use of carbon-free energy, initially from water extracted from the Exe, but now changed to 4 gas boilers and air source heat pumps, not all of which can operate because the electricity grid lacks capacity. New information submitted shows 25% of annual outcome will be powered by gas, even if all the air pumps are operational. But if the electrical supply is not sufficient, more gas generation will be necessary. The developer states, as the electricity grid decarbonises, the network will be able to supply zero carbon heat. The national grid's decarbonisation target is 2035. Until then, the developer proposes that carbon emissions will be decided by unspecified anchor customers, not the council. The proposed carbon descent plan lacks clear ownership and targets, yet it is central to ensuring carbon reduction guarantees. It must be updated. The applicant has submitted a sequential test for the sites they previously considered based on the need for a water source. But now the proposal is one for air and gas boilers. They should be required to revisit these sites. The scale of the proposed building will have a huge negative impact on the local area. At 118 metres long, 19 metres high, this is about the height of the Civic Centre building here, but over 3 times as long. Do you think the building will have minimal impact on the local area, or that the benefits outweigh the harm to the Valley Park and those who will visit. We made further representations suggesting that if you are minded to approve the application, the building should be located adjacent to Marsh Barton Station, so that all industrial functions are away from the canal. The applicant should undertake flood mitigation works on the site to support the building being positioned there. If repositioned, the residual open space will be better linked to and accessible from a traffic-free canal area rather than wedged between two huge industrial buildings with resulting traffic movements and noise. Tree planting may eventually help to hide the building from the Valley Park. The director's report says this is a significant, controversial and sensitive application, but it's also a complex proposal as much as about aspirations for carbon reduction and net zero as the impact of the development upon the environment. Low to zero carbon is not even a proposed condition. We encourage you to refuse this application, but if you are minded to approve, we would urge you to defer your decision so the applicant can submit the following information. Provide full disclosure of the carbon descent plan to the committee and a clear net zero target date, mandatory reporting and delivery of carbon savings. Confirm when sufficient electricity supply can be provided from the grid for air source pumps. Condition the supply of zero carbon heat by 2035. Review the positioning of the energy plant with flood mitigation measures so that residual open space will be better linked to the canal. Provide the missing views of the plant from Clapperbrook Lane to enable the committee to understand the true impact of the proposals. Submit a revised noise impact assessment for the proposed leisure area within the site. Submit a revised sequential report to include EA recommendations so you can be clearer that none of the previously considered sites are usable. Thank you for listening. I'm happy to answer any points for clarification.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Lewis. That was very well presented. I now invite members to ask Mr. Lewis questions. Councillor Harding.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, thank you for that. Interesting to hear that. Can I ask you where the figure of 25% for gas comes from, please? Because yeah, I've heard different numbers used for that. So where you got that one from?
Yeah, well, my colleague Chris Pope found that in amongst the documents, and maybe if I could turn it around, he might be able to just, Chris?
It's in the update that was issued from.
Update issued on Friday, right. Okay, yeah, that was in response to Councillor Diana Moore's questions, which the developer submitted.
Because yeah, I thought there was because yeah, what your said seems to be it's 25% all the time. It's going to be. I wonder if
that's the graph, I think, which indicates 25%, and I think that's through as an average across the year. Our concern, of course, would be that if there was also a lack of electrical supply, will there be more gas boilers used, and therefore there will be higher emissions.
Thank you. Can I just say that possibly this is a question best directed to One Energy, and I think we will definitely need to pursue them on this later. So I don't want to take too much time from Mr. Lewis, but maybe other questions. So do we have any other questions relating to this? I'm going to ask you then, sir, about you were talking about about the fact that the grid's not capable and things like that. My understanding is that the reason why they have developed the energy centre to the plan that it is to the specifications of the grid at the moment. Do you understand differently from that?
Well, again, my colleague Chris Pope, who has looked into the technical aspirations, that is his understanding, and I think it was mentioned in, Chris, if you can remind me, which document was that mentioned in?
In the roundable air quality report, stated that in the short term, the electrical grid isn't sufficient to.
Again, my understanding was that was for 10 boilers, not the 4, but or for the 5, if all 5 boilers were running simultaneously, but not if it was 4. So again, we will examine that a bit later on. Councillor Atkinson.
Yeah, you mentioned that it should be on the other side of the river, next to the energy from waste facility. have you identified a suitable size plot of land that is available for sale?
I didn't say the other side of the river. I said closer
It
to
could-
the
yeah,
railway
well-
line and the waste from energy
Okay,
plant.
so have you identified a plot of land of a suitable size that is for sale and that could be technically appropriate? Have you identified that?
No, other than the
Okay.
Grace Road field, if you are minded to agree it, to have the building moved closer to the industrial buildings, because we believe that what will be left of that site will be unpleasant and unused by the public.
Yes, I understand that,
Unlike-
but in order to have another site, you have to identify that site, because we can't just go and build something on somebody else's land.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Poll, then Councillor Hughes.
On that same point, so my understanding is it's sort of an aesthetic issue, that you think that it would be better off close to the railway station, although I've read some points in the commentaries and the reports about the potential flooding impact on the railway of moving it closer to the railway, and that's potentially one of the reasons it's further away. But also just as a visitor to that area, I think sort of, you know, coming down the path, you are closer to, like, as a user of the area, you are closer to the railway station, like heading down the estuary. So although from the river it might be more visible, in fact it would be kind of further away from most of the footfall, I think. So I just wondered where you were, like, from the sort of aesthetics, which was it, the river users or the path users, that you were trying to give a
Yeah.
better
Okay.
sort of experience?
It would be a combination of both people visiting the River Valley Park, because particularly with the development of the railway station, that entrance has been highlighted as one of the gateways to the River Park. And now, you know, the first impression you get is going to be the energy from waste plant and this very, very big building. If you're a pedestrian, you're going to walk down either the overbridge or the footpath, and you have to then, of course, walk towards the canal anyway, before you then can turn into the site. So you have to double back on yourself with the layout that's been proposed, and then walk between the industrial building and the access road to the station, and then walk in behind that to get to the open green space.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. I'd like to move on to Councillor Hughes. We've reached our 5 minutes, but it's only fair for Councillor Hughes to ask their question.
Thank you, Chair. It's a very quick question for clarification, just for myself, so that I can understand where you're coming from. In my mind, from what you've said, you've got short-term concerns and long-term concerns regarding the positioning of the building. As I understand it, the long-term concerns are the loss of green space and flooding, and everything else is a short-term concern. Can you just clarify that for me, just that I haven't missed out a long-term concern other than green space and flooding?
Nothing is short-term. Once this building is there, you can be very sure, I'm sure it'll be there 50, 60, 70 years. And Mr. Collison might be able to tell you how long the lease will be, if that's agreed. But it's a huge investment if it does happen. Nobody's going to spend £100 million for 10 or 20 years. You know, it's going to be a long-term development. So everything is long-term. The impact from people locally, I appreciate long-distance views. It's hardly going to be seen, partly because of the buildings around there and some of the trees, which again may not last a lifetime of the building. The trees may die, and you know that screen between the canal and the building will be lost at some point in the future. Now, maybe it's a requirement that this developer mitigates any of that in the future by maybe putting additional planting in at some point. I'm not sure if that's possible, but the short-term views of people are walking along the canal path coming down Clapperbrook Lane. It's going to be a very, very big building. If it's anywhere near the size of this building, which I think it is height-wise, it's not going to be hidden away by a few trees.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lewis. Are you okay, Councillor Hughes?
Yeah, no, it's just, you were talking about the electrical grid not being able to cope with it, those sorts of things. That's what I meant by short term. In terms of long term, what you've just described, I would consider that under the loss of green space, I think. But yeah, thank you. That's what I was trying to get you to explain. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. Thank you very much, Mr. Lewis, for your contribution.
Thank you.
We're now moving on to our next speaker. This is a supporter on behalf of One Energy, Mr. Paul Barker. Mr. Paul Barker, could you approach, please? Mr. Barker, your microphone's on, and that's it. So again, get yourself comfortable and ready. We will be timing up 5 minutes, and you're welcome.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, so Chair, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I'm here on behalf of Exeter Energy Limited to present the application for the new Exeter Energy Centre on Grace Road. I'll briefly set out the key benefits of our proposal to help inform your decision. First, the climate crisis. In 2019, the City Council declared a climate emergency and as part of the Exeter Net Zero plan, pledged to create a carbon neutral city by 2030, which is less than 5 years away. A priority action within that plan was to transition public sector buildings to locally generated renewable energy, such as district heat networks. And the Exeter Energy Network will do this, as well as enable non-public sector buildings to also transition to renewable energy. Once the first phase of the network is complete, the Energy Centre will generate nearly 90,000 megawatt hours of low carbon heat every year from a combination of large air source heat pumps and waste heat from the adjacent Grace Road Energy Recovery Facility. The scheme will reduce gas use by 3/4 from each connected building, equating to 13,000 tonnes of CO2 savings per year, while also delivering local air quality improvements from the reduction in natural gas burning. The Energy Centre is also future-proofed to add further low-carbon heat sources, including use of the river and canal, and waste heat from off-site data centres. Exeter Energy is contractually committed to this level of low-carbon heat, and is a stipulation of our Green Heat Network funding. We will also be contractually committing to this when supplying heat to major public sector anchor customers, such as the RD&E hospitals and University of Exeter. Eventually, the peaking gas boilers within the Energy Centre will be removed to deliver true zero carbon heat. The timeframes for this are unclear though, as it will need the electricity grid to be fully decarbonised and changes in energy tariffs so that zero carbon heat is affordable when compared to gas-fired heating. In regards to why this location was chosen, we assessed over 15 potential sites across Exeter. None are perfect, but this site is by far the most appropriate because of its location close to multiple low-carbon heat sources, including the adjacent Viridor Energy from Waste Plant and the Canal and River X, with space in our design for future water source heat pumps. The site is also ideally located to accommodate the large air source heat pumps, which is the initial low carbon heat generation technology we'll be using due to its distance away from other buildings. The site is also very close to the new Water Lane development, so it's ideally located to supply low carbon heat to the several thousand homes being built there. Negotiations are well advanced with the Water Lane site developer, with contracts due to be agreed by the end of this year, as are negotiations with Viridor to take waste heat from the energy recovery facility. In terms of wider benefit, the project is also a major boost to the local economy, with a total investment in the city of over £150 million. Of this, 30 million has been separately secured by the University of Exeter, Exeter College and the Royal Devon NHS Trust to fund heating system improvements within their buildings and connections to the heat network. It will create over 150 jobs during construction. And also, whilst heat networks are a relatively small industry in the UK, they need to expand rapidly to support the UK's transition to net zero. Working with Exeter College, the project will support this green skills agenda and offer apprenticeships to ensure young people in the city have the appropriate skills required to take advantage of the green jobs of the future that heat networks have to offer. It will also deliver significant nature and public access improvements, replacing a low biodiversity value site with one that is much more ecologically diverse, with a project potentially delivering 57% biodiversity net gain, far more than the 10% required in the current planning policy. In terms of timing, finally, the project is time sensitive and there is not a better moment to deliver affordable low carbon heat to Exeter than now, with all grant funding secured and in place. However, both Exeter Energy's and the other public sector bodies' grant funding are time limited. The 30 million grant funding the university and hospital have secured is now closed to any future applicants and must be spent within the next 3 years. Ultimately, as the UK transitions away from fossil fuels, the Exeter Energy Network will provide the most affordable, low and ultimately zero carbon heat to homes and businesses compared to the alternatives. The Chair, members of the committee, this energy centre is a platform for meaningful climate action, economic opportunity and lasting community benefit. This will be a project Exeter can be proud of, an exemplar in their efforts to reduce carbon for the city. So we respectfully ask for your support. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Barker. I have Councillor Mitchell first, then Councillor Paul.
Thank you for your presentation. And for the previous presentation, I recall that we were leading on that one before. As I say, I think the two issues here. One is the principle, which I think nobody would disagree with. The second is location, effectively, the site of this particular premises at this time on this particular greenfield site. And I'd like to draw attention to page 13 of the officer's report, which you effectively mentioned that the site search has demonstrated that the proposed development cannot currently be located on a site outside the Valley Park or a flood risk zone 3. You mentioned in your talk to us that you looked at 15 alternative sites. None were perfect. Even this one is not perfect. If you didn't proceed on this site, is there an alternative site in Exeter? Or is simply this the only site in the whole of Exeter's area and the catchment area around Exeter that would support this scheme?
So I would say this is the only site with the opportunity to deliver future-proof carbon heating because of its location next to the energy from waste plant for a start. So that limits the location, the other locations for this site. Additionally, the river and the canal are ideal solutions for future-proofing for additional water source heat pumps on the site. So again, that means it will need to be close to the river and all the canal. So for those points, yeah, effectively we feel this is the only real kind of future.
Just briefly, you did mention that you're time limited on grants and government funding. Clearly, this involves a tremendous amount of highway work and disruption in Exeter to get to your potential customers. They aren't customers yet. Your potential customers. How many years of disruption are we likely to have in Exeter on our highways?
Yeah, the network is, this is a sustainable energy infrastructure that's going to be with the city for the next 60, 70 years at least. Yes, there will be some congestion impacts, but we're minimising that through regular discussion with Devon Highways to ensure we reduce that impact as much as we can.
If I could just remind members that that's we're talking in the future there, and that's nothing to do with the application that's in front of you now. I understand the concern, Councillor Mitchell, but that's not really for this committee. I'll take you after Councillor Atkinson. Councillor Poll.
Oh yeah, hi. So I picked up a few things there. One was about the tariffs. So are you saying, can we be quite sure that the tariff, that the prices are going to be sort of locked in and affordable for the, I don't know if this is a planning concern or is it's not a planning concern? Okay. All right, then my other questions were about how important is the proximity in terms of sort of the efficiency of the operation, being close to the, like, is there some sort of quotient for the sort of loss of energy that you would get from a further site? Also, I noticed on some of the diagrams that it's next door to the solar array that we use to power the city's waste collection service. So has any thought been put into any potential tapping into that solar array as a sort of a source? And then just a comment that I'm just really delighted to hear that you're so far along with the Water Lane development, because obviously a lot of properties there that will be sounds like it will be potentially heated with this climate friendly way.
Yeah, so in terms of location, the good thing about heat networks is they can be, they don't have to be right next to the buildings that they're supplying, but they do need to be very close to where the energy generation is. So that's why this site is required really, because the local or the low carbon generation either comes from the air, from the energy from waste plant or the river. And so this is where it's a perfect location really in terms of those opportunities in the future. So yeah, that's the rationale for the site. Sorry, what's the last question?
I noticed it's close to the solar array.
Yes.
Is there any? Have you looked into that? And then that was it really.
Yeah, no, I mean there is an opportunity to connect. The challenge is that the heat demand is in the winter, and often that's not when the solar is at its best. So it would help, but it's ideally there's a we're talking electricity from the grid where ultimately it's offshore winds will be generated to provide that power.
Right, members, obviously we've got to our 5 minutes. We extended the time for the other speakers, so I'm going to extend the time here. I'm going to stick to the list of councillors I have to speak at the moment in the order I have. So Councillor Harding next, please.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for the presentation. When we saw the original plans, I think sounded like it was going to be much more certain that the river and the incinerator were going to be used for heat. And at the moment, to start off with, they won't be. So what is the likelihood they're definitely going to be used in the future? Because if at the moment it's starting without them, how sure can we be that they are going to be used in the future with your plans, which makes it necessary to be in that very spot there? I've got one other question as well. So can I ask that now, or should I?
Do you want me to answer that one?
Yeah, all right. Yeah, if you don't mind. Yeah,
yeah.
Okay,
yeah. So in terms of the, I mean, this is the first phase of an energy centre that's hoping to deliver much more zero carbon heat to the rest of the city, and we need it future proof because we don't know what's around the corner in terms of demands. But in terms of so the first phase is air source heat pumps. That also needs to be really on this site, so it's away from other buildings. The energy from waste. We are in negotiations with them. The Viridor plant also has a condition to provide waste heat to our solution as well. So we're confident that is going to happen. And I say this is the first phase. Water source will need to happen at some point in the future.
So, Councillor, if you had to put a percentage on it, what percent likely is it that you will be using those sources nearby?
So in the next 3 years, I'd say 95% on we're going to have that Viridor connection, right, subject to a appropriate contract there, because the other thing is we need it to be affordable heat for the hospital and the university. So we need to make sure that we get that heat. Okay,
right. Thank you. The other one was 25%. When I asked about this a while ago, about what percent was going to come from gas, and it looked like 25% was an absolute maximum in the winter, or maybe if the boiler of the heat, the air source heat pumps broke down. But then on this latest answer to the question, it looks like 25% gas is going to be the standard starting point.
So during the summer, spring, and the autumn, there'll be very little, if any, gas usage at all. It'll be pretty much 100% running on the air source and all the energy from waste. What you have got though in the depths of winter, everybody switching their heating on, is you've got a really big peak, and we would need to have 5 times the kind of generation to meet that. Now in the future, we are going to have to get rid of gas. And that could be e-boilers, further air source, or the water source. So that's where we're sort of future proofing for.
So is that 25% as an average over the whole year, or would that be?
Yes, it is.
Right.
It is average over the whole year. Yes.
Oh,
yeah.
Right. So it would be more than that in.
Yeah. So in the depths of winter, for those kind of 2 or 3 hours, probably about 7 o'clock in the morning.
Okay. Right.
Yeah, we'd be
Right.
more.
I just, if I may, just one last point really quickly about moving it, because it does look like at the moment it's by the trees. Why can't it be by the, as the Civic Centre said, Civic Society said, why can't it be by the railway line? And then nature's got the extra grass and the trees and the canal all together then.
Yeah, no. So the issue is that the modelling that we did and working with the Environment Agency, did not want us to be too close to the railway line because of how the flooding happens, and right, the water in a flood situation would actually make it worse for the railway line. So we had to be away to allow water to flow next to the railway line and away.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to Councillor Atkinson.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. Right. Yeah, it's partly touched on what I want to explore a bit further. For the last 8 years, I've been chairing the community liaison with the energy from waste, and on every single agenda, we've had a heat network using that facility that's got from the energy from waste. So I'm delighted to hear that this is progressing to a negotiation stage so that can be done. Are there any technical reasons why that could not be done? And have you got a plan to overcome them? Because obviously Viridor, I think you're pushing an open door from the last 8 years, the conversations I've been having with them from the community to making that happen. So are there any technical? And then the other thing, you know, from the energy from waste facility, we know that every year we will have to close down the incinerators for servicing, in which case for that small period of time, the refuse goes to landfill. So presumably, would you have a similar close down to service the air source heat pumps? And have you factored that into the 25%?
Thank you. In terms of the technical reasons, we're still doing detailed design, but effectively there's no technical reason why we couldn't. I mean, what was great about the energy from waste plant is that it's ready to provide us with waste heat. So in the turbine between stage 1 and stage 2, there's 2 taps ready for us to connect in. So it's already been future-proofed in that regard. In terms of the 2 weeks, so you have a 2-week shutdown for the energy from waste plant. You don't get that with air source heat pumps, and we will be potentially having multiple air source heat pumps. But they will require regular servicing. But we have got a very large thermal store as well, and that could actually, in the summer when there's very low heat demand, that could serve for weeks without the air source heat pumps being utilised. So that's when we'll be doing our any sort of maintenance will be in the summer when you've got low heat demand.
Thank you, Councillor Ketchy.
Thanks. There hasn't been any discussion about the sequential test. That's a test to say that it has to be on this site when it's in a grade 3 flooding zone, because you've sort of not got any other sites you can put it on. Marsh Barton was mentioned in that work, and I think your company commissioned the sequential test. It's your piece of work. Did you approach any landowners in Marsh Barton to actually have a discussion about a purchase of land or a possible purchase of land, in the way that, you know, if I was going to set up a business, I might go about approaching a business to sort of buy them out and set my stall out? Did you make any formal approaches like that?
We didn't. We did have a land agent look at the opportunities and what's for sale, but there's limited space for an energy centre on Marsh Barton. But the major problem with Marsh Barton is it's the wrong side of the railway line. So any sort of solution that's going to supply heat from or take heat from the river or canal, we'd have to have some really big pipes going from the river underneath the canal, and they have to be a little bit like drainage. It has to be at a certain they can have a certain gradient. So I'd be at least cost prohibitive, if not technically unviable. So that's why we discounted Marsh Barton.
Right, thank you, members, and thank you, Mr. Barker, for your presentation. Right, we are now moving into the officer's report, and pay attention to your various screens, or those of you that have the printed copy, use those.
Thank you, Chair. So first slide sets out the red line, the application boundary, and then extends from the highway at the end of Water Lane to the site for construction access, and includes the approximately 2/3 of the field at Clapperett Lane East, at Grace Road Field, within the red line boundary of the site. During operational phase, post-construction access would be via Clapperett Lane. It wouldn't require large vehicles in that phase. So an aerial view sets the scene. talked about the solar farm to the north, and immediately north of that, you've got the gas peaking plant, and there was a resolution to grant planning for housing on the land between the rail and the canal further north, which is the water lane development we talked about or spoken about in conversation and in questions. You see the site itself between the rail and the canal, and the northern portion of it was used, and it shows up here in its previous use as the construction compound for the rail station. And immediately to the west of the rail line, you see the energy from waste plant we talked about this connecting to in the future as well. You've got a substantial belt of trees around the north, around the east, and around the south of the site, and for part of the western boundary. And there's gaps in that, which we will highlight with photographs. So this is from Crapperbrook Lane, looking into the site. You see the trees at the very far end of the site. The red line takes up 2/3 of that open space from this end, moving down. On the left-hand side, you see the substantial tree belt, trees up to 29 metres tall on the boundary with the canal. It's a shot looking along Clapperroot Lane east, in westwards, looking towards the energy from waste plant in the background and the entrance to the station. The entrance to the site would be on the left where the person is walking, and that would be raised to facilitate the continued priority for the cycle and pedestrian route. And construction actions would cross this and would come in from the right, and it requires the removal of 3 trees that we look on the plan. This is looking from the bridge and the station and into the site in the background. You can see the stand of substantial trees up to 29 metres tall on that side, and the stand of trees on the left, which are along Clapperroot Lane east as the railway embankment slopes down from the bridge. As you can see, it's a level grassland site. Up until 2012, it was marked out for pitches, but hasn't been marked out or used for formal recreation since that season. This is internal to the site, looking across towards the energy from waste plant, and this is the one breaking the substantial tree belt around the site. So photos looking back from the city centre and from some of the more important locations looking at direction. You can see the energy from waste, and between that and the pylon further to the left are the belts of trees that surround this site. And just looking from further back, and it hasn't been raised as an issue, so we will skip over this, but we don't think there's any harm in long range views of the site. So we talked about planning policies. This is the planning policy map, and just to make point that the site is allocated both as Valley Park, but it is also part of the designation in the Exeter Local Plan Route First Review for development, and you see the sort of pink, which includes the water lane area, but also the area of the solar farm and this site. Core strategy doesn't contain site allocations, so that the site appears with the land use designation of Valley Park only. But that's because it doesn't include the allocation of development, which is in the Exeter local plan, which is also part of the development plan. We also have a recently adopted SPD, which gives detailed guidance for the development in the water lane area, and that supports the development plan policies. The site is the green area next to the station at the bottom of that slide. And it talks about it being a wildlife, nature and energy opportunity. Talks about uses, a specific policy S15 that lists priorities, and it lists uses that are suggested suitable. So BNG, habitat bank, woodland creation, recreational area, wildlife hub, canal basin, marina, energy centre, allotments and solar farm. It says the Riverside Ludwell Valley Park master plan should be used for ideas and reference. That master plan is not a planning document, it's not been subject to, it's not been adopted for development management purposes. So one of the key issues for the site is flood risk. So this is the Environment Agency flood zone mapping. You see the site outlined in red, and it shows the site wholly within flood zone 3. The proposal is for critical infrastructure, which is only acceptable in flood zone 3 if there are no alternative sites at lower risk from flooding, and if the harms outweigh the benefits. So looking at the detailed flood risk assessment of the site, and the colouring is showing the depths, and this includes allowance for climate change. So in the immediate setting, there's a risk of flooding up to 0.5 metre, but when we look at the design life of the building, 100 years, we start to look at the potential, the risk for flooding up to 2 metres deep on the southern part of the site, between 1.5 and 2 metres deep, where the energy centre is proposed to be located. So we'll start with a section of the building just to illustrate, to respond to that flood risk. One of the elements is that the building is raised up and floodwater capacity is retained underneath the main building, and needs to maintain the ability for water to pass through and flow through. Elevations of the building, and you can see 5 flues, and they got to 22 metres above level, and the air source heat pumps, which are the grey band across the elevation, got to 19 metres above level. So looking at a wider section of the site, north-south, you can see the thermal stores, which are effectively a large heat battery. It allows heat to be generated over an extended period and stored, ready for peak demand, and also, as we've heard, allows for shutdown periods. Elevations of the building. The application was revised through the process to remove an energy centre that's proposed for the site, and also to rationalise the buildings and enclose a lot of the industrial equipment inside buildings. So a visitor centre that was a separate element has been incorporated in the building. And that's on the north elevation, you can see the windows of that looking out. So one of the elements of the building is for education and community sort of education purposes, and to enable visits to the energy centre. Got some floor plans showing how the generators that we spoke about are incorporated inside the building, also electrical switchgear, and so on. This is to make it look more attractive rather than having initial iterations of design done externally. It also looks more attractive to rationalise them inside buildings, but also reduces any noise breakout, and you can insulate the building from noise breakout. Going up through the building of sections until you get to the air source heat pumps on the roof. So these are a reduced part of the roof area. This is an artist's impression showing the circular thermal stores, 6 small ones and 1 large at the rear. The energy centre building with the air source heat pumps on the roof, and visitor centre accommodated within the building at the Clapperrook Lane East end. It also shows how routes can circulate around the building and use this space that is retained both between the building and the railway line and at the southern end of the site. The reason it is cited there, we started off with buildings that were cited in initial discussions further north, getting as far north or near the railway as possible. But the reason it's cited there, has been touched on, is to do with flood risk. And what happens if you put the building close to the railway line is that when floodwater flows through the site, it pushes water onto the railway line and increases flood depth on the railway line. And that it wouldn't be accepted in planning terms. It's sort of fundamental to the principle of the exception test that you develop in a floodplain. You do need to show that you cope with it yourself, and you definitely don't make it worse for anybody else. So sections through the site. On the top one, showing the energy from waste plant. On the right hand side, the railway station, the proposed plant, and the thermal stores, and trees shown rather modestly. The trees on the canal, as we said, about are 29 metres tall, so they are substantially taller than the flues on the energy centre building in reality. This is details of the construction access coming down from the north. That's some temporary base during the construction phase, and then access to the site going south from Clapperrook Lane. There'll be very low traffic on that, and you'll discussed it be raised to prioritise the cyclists and pedestrians across the entrance to the site.
So the site showing the red line, showing the siting of the building, showing the opportunities for landscaping and biodiversity net gain. And within the site itself, the biodiversity net gain would be 57%. The line boundary, that's opposed to a statutory minimum of 10%, so substantial enhancement of wildlife and biodiversity on the site. You can see tree planting, and we looked at a photograph on the site showing a break in the boundary which surrounds the wider site on that side. So I think tree planting there will be helpful in the wider landscaping, providing some greater screening of the station and energy from waste plant as well. So looking at the access in detail, talking about 3 trees need to be removed for construction access. None of the trees on the site are subject to tree preservation orders. They have been surveyed, they are in good health, and there is a requirement as part of this application to preserve the remainder of the trees, and also substantial tree planting, 30 trees a minimum replacement planting for the 3 being removed for construction access. The red line boundary of the site leaves a portion of the rear of the southernmost part of the site outside the red line. And this is an area that the applicant would take on and enhance for recreation, but also would improve the biodiversity that part of the site as well. And it offers the opportunity to formalise some of the circular routes at the bottom of the site. The number marked 10 on that plan is currently informal access by dog walkers, because there's a reasonably at grade access to the canal towpath. So formalising that and creating circular routes and more attractive routes for the informal recreation use of the site. So the planning balance, we've got the positives and negatives in there. Economic benefits, we've heard about jobs, creating skills enhancements, which would secure the local benefits through a skills plan attached to any consent. Enhanced resilience of local energy supply, enhancements of the wider public space, landscaping, additional tree planting, significant biodiversity net gain on the site, and also biodiversity net gain on the adjacent remaining portion of Graceford Fields. Decarbonisation, we've heard a number of public sector organisations, and there are also commercial customers in the initial phase that were provided with low carbon heat in the initial, and it will provide pathway to net zero for existing buildings. We've heard about the energy from waste offtake, we've heard about the potential for water source heat, and there is land reserved within the compound for water source heat to be included. So that wouldn't require any expansion of the site, that could be accommodated in the existing fenced compound. We talked about harms, which is development in an area subject to flood risk. So about loss of part of the open space, loss of 3 trees, introduction of built form into the landscape setting, and noise impact on Valley Park. And all those harms we've worked through the application, amended it to try and minimise those as far as possible and mitigate them with suggested conditions. For example, with noise, making sure that plants are accommodated within buildings as far as possible, and a condition suggested to manage noise from the plant. So in terms of concluding, we've mitigated as far as possible, avoided, reduced and mitigated any harms as far as possible, secured measured by conditions or legal agreements to do so. I've reached a position where we think the sequential test has been passed. Talked about 15 sites. I think that actually included as a set a number of sites in Marsh Barton. I think in terms of individual sites, 20 sites were looked at formally as part of the sequential test in terms of flood risk, but also, can this not go somewhere less sensitive? We're satisfied that there aren't any sites that we can suggest that haven't been looked at, sequentially preferable, both in flood risk and sort of landscape terms. So we're satisfied the sequential test has been passed. Exception test requires that the balance of benefits and harms weigh in favour of the benefits, and we can consider those benefits in terms of biodiversity, substantial biodiversity net gain enhancement on the site, in terms of decarbonisation in particular, in terms of economic impacts, in terms of skills and so on, substantially outweigh the harms identified. Consider that the proposed overhaul constitutes sustainable development and that permission should be granted subject to conditions and a legal agreement. Legal agreement securing landscaping and the ongoing management of the area, securing biodiversity, net gain management of that additional area for 30 years, secures a carbon descent plan, and that has been touched on, and it's quite a complicated descent, and that's why it's not there in full detail, but it would secure it, and it would be a public document, need to be agreed and monitored. The carbon descent plan will be required to show how this hits various targets, both in aspirations locally and nationally for carbon reduction. You would need to show how it meets the customers' objectives, and those various customers got different ambitions. The university has very high ambitions for reducing carbon in the short term. Other public sector bodies will have statutory requirements placed by government that are in advance of those placed on private individuals and companies. Will need to be met in another way, if not through this energy centre, through a heat network. So that will be secured by a legal agreement. We talked about new employment skills plan, secure the benefits, talked about 150 construction jobs locally. Many of those are specialist jobs. So we'd rather see people being scaled up locally, and talked about collaborations with Exeter College to do so. And there is a long list of conditions. We won't go through them in detail, but we talked about tree protection, retained trees. We talked about noise assessment, mitigation and management in the future. Yeah, there's a range of construction management, securing details, and triggers there now listed in detail in the committee report. The recommendation is in two parts: one to approve subject to those conditions 106, but also if that 106 is not completed within 6 months of committee, that the delegated authority is also given to the service lead city development to refuse the application.
Thank you, Howard. Right, questions on the officer's presentation, please, before we move to debate. Any questions of clarification? Councillor Harding.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. There's a couple of questions I want to ask, please, if I may. There's a point where you say 3 trees have to be removed for access to the site. Can I just ask why they need to be removed when they managed to build the railway station there without removing those trees? So what's different now that they have to be taken down, please? Thank you.
My understanding is some of the pieces of equipment coming in here are quite substantial. They're coming in. Okay. So we've got boilers coming in, whereas the station was a construction rather than sort of installed.
Oh, okay. And just one other thing, please. On the it was in the full reports pack, not what you mentioned then, but I think it's part of the same thing. That Devon Wildlife Trust says the bat and reptile survey was unsatisfactory. So why wasn't the applicant asked to go away and do a better one? Is there a possibility that could be done now to make sure we mitigate any harm to creatures like that, please?
So yeah, so we use Dorset County Council's ecologist for advice, and they are happy that the surveys have been done to an adequate level. They're quite satisfied.
Fine, thank you. Couple. As you're aware, well, I'm glad you did the picture that it was used as a construction site. So it was half, well, I think that's a third of the site was used for construction of the Marsh Barton over a number of years. So it's whatever you see there on that part of the site is right, isn't it? It's got low biodiversity. It's only been put back to grass fields. So I'm delighted to see that you've got 57% net biodiversity gain, and I'm pleased to see that that it does include a new environment like the water, the fish. Now, further along down that side, there's fishing ponds. Is it intended that the new ponds would be fishing full of fish, and would there be a license for the fisheries that use the other ones to fish on it, or is it purely just for newts and frogs and and the like, or ducks and all the rest of it, and want to go there. And I think you've answered the fact that everybody will be able to walk round that site and enjoy it. Whereas at the moment, I think it's fair to say, isn't it, that hardly anybody does walk around it because it's a pretty boring just field, which hasn't been used as a sport field for at least 10 years. And of course, we've now got the new Bromans pitch, which are now coming back into use, which are much more suitable. So, so that could you just add up what the net biodiversity is? And I think in the report it says we're also going to put some bat boxes and make sure that light doesn't deter any bats that we want. So was it true to say that actually the new facility would encourage habitat for bats, or just provide habitat for the existing bats? And lastly, on the access, as you've rightly pointed out, the access to the Marsh Barton construction site was via Water Lane. And I think it says we're going to have exactly the same access, except for the 3 trees that need to come down as were used last time. So is it right that all the same safety procedures would be in place? And are you satisfied that that access arrangement worked well for the 2 or 3 years that it was used for the construction of the railway station? Thank you.
So in terms of sort of the lakes and the use of the site, my understanding it is for public access. It's not specifically for fishing. It is for recreational use. The ponds will be designed for that. In terms of bats, yes, there's opportunity to, as part of that biodiversity again, is to enhance provision for bat roosting, making use of the existing tree belts as well as sort of new tree planting, and management of lighting. And there's a condition on there to secure the details of lighting. Obviously, in an operational phase, this isn't something that's lit and sort of needs to be floodlit. Has very many people on site, certainly at night. So yeah, it would be managed, and there is a condition to secure details of lighting. Yes, so in terms of the highways arrangements for the construction, it would be the Devon County Council. Clearly, the Marsh Barton station, I would hope it'd be better, and they would learn lessons from that, and it'd be better than it was. So,
Thank you, Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Chair. 2 quick questions, if I may, both relating to the flood risk. So you talked about one of the really important things about building on a floodplain or an area that's at risk of flooding is to make sure that you don't push the problem onto someone else, which makes complete sense. So I just want to be clear in my mind that if there are flood issues in the future on the site, would those issues be very much the within the remit of the developer to mitigate, to sort out, to solve? Is there any risk of the council being pulled in to have to solve any flooding issues on the site? That's my first quick question. Do you want to answer that, or shall I ask the other one?
Yeah, the developer has designed this building to be sort of not to cause flood risk on other sites, and to be resilient in itself, so it should continue operating in a flood situation.
Okay, so bearing in mind we can't predict how flooding is going to change in the future, but you're satisfied that what can be done has been done to mitigate that, yeah? Yeah, no, I get that, yeah, thanks.
It does incorporate an allowance.
Thank you. I just wanted to be really clear that we've done that. And the other question might seem a bit odd, but it just comes from my own personal experience of air source heat pumps years ago, and I'm hoping they're better now. But the ones I had kicked out an awful lot of condensation and therefore created their own little floods. So is there any chance that these massive air source heat pumps are going to kick out a similar amount of condensation? Is that going to contribute to any kind of water on the surface water, anything like that? It just, yeah, it turned the patio into an ice rink basically in the winter. So I'm just curious, I guess.
understand there is a potential for in cold weather for there to be, visible pluming from the air source. But we will notice they are on the roof now. So as long as the roof is designed, it'll take the water and it'll run off into the drainage.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Councillor Pole, please.
Yeah, I just have a few different aspects. So first of all, just in terms of sort of public usability, my understanding is that there will be two entrances to the site, one from the existing desire line from the canal path through the steps, and the other one through the main site entrance from Clapperbrook Lane that will be shared with vehicle entrance, although probably not a lot of vehicle movements. And you said that the pedestrians would have the priority there, but that would be positioned more towards the canal side. So if you were coming from Marsh Barton or the train station, you would kind of go along the tree line and then through at the sort of eastern end of the Clapperbrook towards the car park. That was just one thing I wanted to clarify, just about the accesses, because just into, which I guess would make a loop. Another one would be just about sort of as a parent, just thinking about the usability of the play areas. So from the play areas, which look really good, are in the blue line section of the plan. And I'm just looking at that sort of area up where the trees are near the station and within the red line, and just wondering if from a sort of planning perspective there could potentially be any potential to just put some usable sort of play stuff up there that's closer to the housing, because otherwise you've got, just to make it more just easier, from a sort of, just popping your kids on a swing for 20 minutes perspective. I don't know, because otherwise it's sort of quite a destination, I suppose, just in terms of the play areas further down. Then I had a question about the cladding. So I was looking at the this isn't actually in the presentation, but there are some renders in the presentation. But one of them,
Outline, isn't it?
what?
It's not the final design, is it? It's
Is it
outline.
yeah. So I just wondered whether some of the other like Bun Hill had more naturalistic cladding, and this one I just wondered what the sort of planned, was it concrete, or what kind of cladding is it sort of envisaged to be in this outline stage, and just whether or not sort of perhaps we've got sort of those kind of longer distance things with logos and things I was worrying about. And then, Chair, anything to do with sort of the sort of S106 and the conditions is for the later part, is it, rather than this section, or do I get into that? Is this
Not as far as I'm aware. This is an outline planning permission. There's no finalised designs or anything like that. Those would have to be submitted in a separate application, which will be considered by us. And at that stage, we will be looking at the 106 agreement. So
I see. So that's not sort of in scope.
Oh, 106 is now. Yes.
106 is now. Okay, yeah. So there was a question about SO1, S106 contributions, and one of the commenters had suggested S106 could be put towards changing rooms at Bromans Field. So I don't know. Is that one of the? Is that Sill? Is that, well, I don't know. I just wondered if that is something.
Okay, Councillor Paul, the director can give you a lead on that.
Okay, and then just, did we have I think we had a long distance view from the canal towpath that showed that the building was basically going to be, maybe apart from the chimney, is going to be basically screened by the existing trees. I just wanted to double check that we had Because that's basically, most people aren't going to be in a boat, are they? They're going to most basically be in coming down the tow path. And I just wondered sort of how high the elevation above the tree line would be coming down southbound. Oh, and then my other question, sorry, was just when you get down to the blue line bit, the whole entrance to that, other than the one coming in from 10 on the towpath, would be via the western side. You wouldn't be able to come down, or there wouldn't be a path, or you would have no access, or would you be able to sort of go off grid, to go down between the canal and the building to get down on the other side of the building?
Right, so two entrances, yes. So this is showing an entrance, pedestrian entrance back onto the towpath. And then the other entrance to this space is where the existing entrance is. Play areas, I mean, it's sort of on the way type play rather than formal play. Landscaping is one of the reserve matters. So the detailed design of the landscaping is for a further application. Yes, we can look at, what sort of features can be accommodated where as part of the landscaping. Section 106 is part of this application now. This site hasn't been used for playing pitches for over 12 years, so there is no loss of formal sports pitch provision. We don't feel, therefore, it is acceptable in planning terms to ask for a contribution towards sports pitches, because there's no harm to sports pitches that needs to be offset. And we talked about coming down between the building. No, it isn't. It is deliberately intended that the area between the building and the compound and that tree belt, is people don't go in between it, and that tree belt remains as a more naturalistic and sort of protected space for wildlife. And people are directed around this side of it. Yeah, so and say yes, the application is an outline. The form and massing of the buildings are being determined now. The principal use, the access is all being determined now. The reserve matters are landscape and appearance. So the cladding is for a future application. So yeah, we sort of note the ones you've highlighted out of the list, and wood cladding at Bun Hill. Yeah, we can talk to the applicant about cladding. It will come back for a further approval.
But in terms of the long distance views from coming down the canal path, I think you showed a slide that showed that it was going to be pretty much screened.
Yeah, longer distance views. I mean, the flues on here are 22 meters tall. The trees are 29 meters tall. So the building in longer distance views will be completely screened. In shorter distance views, you will sort of see it through trees and on Clapperwood Lane. It is more local impact, but we don't think there's a long range impact on landscape.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Councillor Ketchum, please.
The original, we're talking today about outline planning for the red line that's been allocated to this site. And there's lots of matters that are outside the red line of this site, so I'll touch on both. The original red line, to my memory, was about half the size of that, I think 3-point-something acres, and that looks maybe twice the size. But the industrial footprint, the hard kit right in the middle of the space is probably smaller than the original proposal. I think that's agreed. So can I just get an understanding of what are we agreeing on tonight? Are we agreeing on potential development of that whole site, i.e. the council is leasing or selling that whole site now rather than just the industrial component, which was the original thing that went out of public consultation? Can we just get a bit of clarity on that? The other question is related, so it'll continue, is we're hearing all sorts of wonderful potential for development of the remainder of the site, which has never been consulted on at this stage. This is a new thing that's come, and now we're hearing about potential development of the whole site with ponds and all the rest of it. And absolutely, it's been brought to the planning committee. It looks wonderful, but the public's not had to say on that, because as far as this is last week has been the first time I've seen that. So are we actually now talking about the potential development of the remainder of the site, which is not being put up for lease or sale? Is it because there's funding for this? Or, as I understood it, the original sale of the capital value of this land was going to be scooped up into the wider Exeter pot, and it wasn't part of any proposal to develop their society. So I'd like to know about that. And my last question, just finalise my real niche subject tonight, is about the sequential test. How much officer time went into validating the claims of the sequential test? There's 20 sites. I've obviously asked the developer about how much was looked at in Marsh Barton, which shares many of the advantages of this site. And I'd just like to hear what officer time went into the scrutiny of the validity of the sequential test. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Director first.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So I think, first of all, it's really important for the planning committee to understand that what's in front of you this evening is a planning application. I know that's obvious, but given the comments we've just heard, it's really important that what you're not considering is any decision that the council might want to take in regards to the land itself. Whether that's sale or lease, that is completely not your issue this evening. So just be really clear about that. So that's a completely separate process, and you mustn't conflate the two. I'm afraid that is just the way the law is written. It's absolutely fine for any applicant to consider land outside their red line, especially if it's in one single ownership, which this is. So it's quite common for applicants to show how other parts of the land can be improved or in this case used to mitigate potential harm. That's very common, normal, not a problem. We can wrap all of that up in a Section 106 agreement or indeed in conditions. So it's quite a normal process to do that. And you've seen many applications like that in the past. I think it's quite unreasonable to ask an officer to give a timeout on how much time has been spent on a given assessment process. That's really difficult for anyone to say. We don't manage our time that way. We're not a planning consultant, so we don't put in timesheets for any given task. It's part of the process. And Howard sat there, spent a long time, months, looking at this application, working with the applicant, working with statutory undertakers to come and bring this application to you this evening. So it's really not possible, and I'd say it's quite an unfair question even to ask how much time he has spent on any given task. We don't have that data.
Thank you. Councillor Ralston.
Sorry, I've just put a mint in my mouth. It's really unprofessional. So my question, please, for somebody who really struggles with spatial awareness and measurements, when you're talking in that it's going to be, what did you say, 22 metres at the flumes? Can you just give, what's that like, for example, in comparison to the height of this building? What is the, give me a building that I can imagine so that I can picture it in, sorry, I can't, just having measurements is really difficult for me, sorry.
There's like 6 cm on the side. And what we do have is cross sections through the side to show you waste. You can see the height of the roof on the right, you can see the height of the flue, you can see the height of
But sorry, also the energy waste plant is not a building that I particularly look at much. Is, you know, roughly quite big. I mean, stories, house stories wise. Sorry.
So there's residential 4 stories.
Oh, okay. So that's okay. Thank you. That's what I needed. And then my second question, it may not be, because this is outlined, it may not be here, but on any of the plans, is the actual building going to have any fencing, or is it going to be, if we're talking about having open space around it, is there plans, or is that a reserved matter. It might be a reserved matter, which is fine.
Line around the buildings. And you can sort of see the perimeter fence and the artist impression. But that is the sort of secure compound around the buildings. It's the dark line you can see going around. There was a question about what's being permitted at that stage. I mean, this is an outline application, but access, layout and massing are all being determined at that stage. So the only buildings that are being approved are the footprints of buildings you can see there. There are no buildings or, across the wider site. It is specific to those. It is landscape and it's the external appearance of the buildings that's reserved only.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you, Chair. Just one question. You've got 3 buildings or 3 units in close proximity. The waste unit you talked about, the railway station, and now this heat unit side by side. I was interested to note that in the consultation documents in section 10, page 16 onwards of the report, there's nothing from the fire service. I just wondered, because I don't know, no indication at all what the fire risk might be from this style of unit, but with its close proximity to a public access station and a waste unit that works on the idea of incineration, I would have thought they might have expressed a view or had a view to express in regard to this particular site and its use.
I will just double check, and I'm pretty confident that we would have consulted them. If we didn't receive a response, they didn't have one to make. They would only be looking at access at this stage. They typically get involved with building detail at building regulation stage.
Right, thank you. I've got a question relating to this biodiversity net gain of 57% and a management for 30 years. And then in this presentation, there's this option 1, which has got this sort of landscaped but public area with sort of a little stream and a circular walk. Is that actually part of the application that we are looking now, or is this just a wish list for the potential future? And the management for 30 years that you're asking for as a condition on this, is that just of the red line area around the site itself, or can we include that future area as well, so that we have somebody else managing that and contributing to that?
Yes, so the application red line is what's on the screen, and the 57% net gain is within that red line. 30 years is the standard period of time in which you need to secure that for to count it as biodiversity net gain. In addition to that, the applicant is suggesting they lay out landscape and manage the further portion of the site. So that is additional to the biodiversity net gain we talked about, 57% within the site. And that is secured through the 106 that they would landscape and manage that.
So again, just you're saying that further landscaping opportunity is secured within the 106 that we are voting on today. Thank you very much indeed.
We've
obviously had some very lengthy questions there of the officer. I want to thank the officers for the huge amount of time that has been spent on this. I also want to thank them for the briefings that we've had during the years as we've seen this progress from something which didn't look all that brilliant to something which is in front of us now. I'm now opening this to debate. I'll remind members please to indicate when you wish to speak and try and keep your comments to the matter in hand. Starting off with Councillor Hughes, and then I'll take notes as we're going along as I see indications.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of things that have come up through all of the presentations from the public as well as officer, and thank you, Howard, that was really, really helpful. I never want to see a loss of green space. Ultimately, that's never something that I want to vote for. However, it sounds as though an incredible amount of work has been done, including liaison with the Environment Agency, that there isn't a suitable alternative. So whilst I'm gutted, frankly, that we're losing some green space, I'm not seeing an alternative. But what I am seeing is gain in terms of carbon reduction with what the site can do. Now, I realise that's not necessarily our job as a planning committee to consider the long-term use forever and ever and ever, but ultimately, in terms of the plans we've agreed for this city, this sits within those plans that we've already agreed as a council in terms of the Exeter plan and trying to achieve net zero by 2030 and things like that. I have concerns about the flooding, but ultimately the Environment Agency is the expert on flooding. So if the Environment Agency is satisfied, then who are we as a committee to argue with the Environment Agency on this particular matter, I would say. I think there were issues that appear to have been mitigated by the developer. I too, like the chair, have attended many briefings on this, so it's been interesting to see it develop. And I think ultimately it's not brilliant, but I don't think there's enough harm for me to vote against it.
Thank you, Councillor. One comment I would make is obviously this is a planning committee looking at a planning application, and external politics are left at the door in this committee. So please focus on the thing in front of you. Councillor Pole.
Yeah, so I guess sort of like looking at the local plan, I suppose the main concerns are the NE1, which is I think the landscape setting, but I think there are like obviously overriding reasons why this facility has to be optimally placed where it is because of the proximity to the energy from waste plant. And then, as Councillor Hughes said, we've got the CC8 flooding mitigation policy, but again, like they say, we have heard from the Environment Agency and they don't have concerns, and neither does Network Rail. So I think those were the two sort of kind of concerns, and it just seems there are a lot of policies: S1, S2, CC1, CC2, CC3, CC7, EJ1, 2, 3, 4, 6, NE3, 4, 6, 7, D1 and IF1, all about infrastructure, carbon reduction, biodiversity gain, and provision of sort of community spaces that we it all seems to tick all the boxes for. So sort of overall, there seems to be a lot of positives coming in with this application.
Thank you, Councillor Pole. Councillor Harding.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, as I've mentioned, I think we need to acknowledge that if the application is allowed, the loss of green space, and it is a valley park. So we have to be careful. We've got to think, that's definitely a loss to the city. Do the benefits of this proposal outweigh that? And that's what I guess we're looking at. And looking at that, I saw the point about 13,000 tonnes of carbon a year is going to be saved from going into the air. And there's a 75% reduction in gas use overall. So even though there are gas boilers on site, overall there's a 75% reduction. And we're city councillors. This is in my ward, so it's of particular importance. But we have to acknowledge we're city councillors. We've got to think what's best for the whole city. And the air quality across the city would clearly improve for that. And I noticed that environmental health say there's no impact on local air quality. There's also biodiversity gains are significant on the site, so I think that's something we have to consider. And there's also one of my other concerns was about the location of it. So why does it have to be there? And we've heard the questions being asked by myself and others about why it needed to be there, and how 20 other sites were looked at. And there's also been some questions about the plan.
does it still need to be there when the river and the incinerator aren't being used as heat sources? But in answer to my question about that, there's a 95% chance in 3 years those things are going to start to be used. So it does give it more of a reason why it has to be in that location. But I'd also be interested to hear what other people are saying as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harding. I have Councillor Ralston now.
Thank you, Chair. I would just like to draw colleagues' attention to the conditions that are coming forward as part of this application recommendation from the officers, and in particular condition 29. We talked about future proofing. We've heard about the 95% chance that there'll be additional heat sources there, and I think it's really important that we've got this one in here which says at such time that the site ceases to be used for generation, storage or transportation of thermal energy, basically it will have to be within 2 years returned to its current state or an agreed landscaping condition. So I think that that's a really important thing to have in there as well, because we've heard a lot about we don't know, we can't predict the future and things, that actually this is not only giving a great opportunity for the city with all of the gains that we've seen, which I think do outweigh the risks for this site, but also on top of that we've got that sort of agreement in here that if it doesn't happen, it has to be returned to its former state as well, so we're not just going to end up with a derelict building. I think the flood mitigations have been proven, and again, as Councillor Hughes says, if the Environment Agency are now happy with the development, how the plans have developed, then I think we need to sort of take their advice on that as well.
Thank you, Councillor Ralston. Councillor Atkinson.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's fantastic that so many public bodies, I mean, I think there were at least half a dozen mentioned: University of Exeter, probably the Met Office, the RD&E, the Exeter College, and its various annexes. I think County Hall's there, and probably we are as well. So many public bodies have come together to put a public funding application or raise funds, or however they've done, to support our carbon reduction ambitions and to get this heat network going. So I'm really pleased that we have this fantastic, if you like, public-private sector partnership in our area, which is going to address climate change and in the next couple of years. And it will be really, I think, a real feather in our cap as a carbon-free, ambitious council to secure this development. I have had reservations. I have worked hard to get those reservations overcome. Before I left being a county councillor, I had a full briefing on the road aspects of this planning application, and I'm entirely satisfied that they are the proposals meet highways, safety, and other issues. I also noted that even the objectors agree that this facility needs to be built. There isn't anybody who says we don't need it. We can achieve carbon reductions without this. Nobody has said that we can't do it. So everyone agrees that. So the only objections it comes down to, is this the right site? And I listened to what the One Energy, I think One Energy said, and I'm very satisfied that their land agent did investigate others. And I had the same briefing from the county council that this facility needs to be built on this side of the railway track and not on the Marsh Barton side. So I'm satisfied that this location is an excellent location, and the joining up with the energy from waste facility has long been an ambition, and within 3 years that we can actually recycle that excess energy into heating Exeter's public buildings and homes and new homes is actually fantastic. The loss of the open space, let's be clear. I mean, this is in the middle of an open space which hasn't been used for 12 years, as we've been seen as a public recreation facility. And all around it, there is still this fantastic open space. I really don't think the dog walkers and the children are really going to be um, disenfranchised for having this building in this wonderful new net biodiversity gained, if you like, enriched is the word, environment where they'll be able to go and look at newts and swans and ducks and all the birds that those kinds of things encourage. So actually, I'm really satisfied that there is not going to be a loss of leisure and other facilities by having this building in this location. So I am pleased that there have been revisions to it, and I'm very satisfied that at this outline stage with what I've heard. I'm very pleased that conditions do include cycle parking on the site. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Atkinson. If I can make some comments myself, my concerns initially were at the height and massing. I'm satisfied that if the trees have been measured at 29 metres high, that they are going to screen it appropriately. When we're considering planning matters, we always know that any planning has a harmful effect. Every planning, no matter what it is, causes harm. What we have to do as a committee is to try and create a balance. And we've heard a lot of information about the balance, and I think that the balance is in favour of this particular application. We never do make decisions based on whether the applicant owns the land that they're applying for, and also we shouldn't take into consideration what's happening outside. The fact that a heat source or a heat network is being built and the pipes are being built is irrelevant to this. That's being funded by completely different sources. With the agreements that are near for the energy from waste plant and the potential then of developing further energy from other sources such as the water source, and even should it ever come to be a data center in the area, I think that this is like an embryo, a catalyst, if you like, for a potential towards actually driving us towards achieving a net zero target. But as I've said already to Councillor Hughes, that's really not what we're looking at today. What we're looking at today is this application that's in front of us. And on balance, I'm looking at it. I've read the documents. I've gone through it all. And on balance, I think that this is an application to be supported. Do any other members have a contribution? Councillor Ketchum.
My view on this project is that the key balancing factor is a sequential test. I agree with Councillor Atkinson. No one's in disagreement that we don't need an energy hub, that we want to move to net zero. There's no climate deniers around the table, I'm pleased to see. But it comes down to the sequential test for me. And the sequential test has been the work of One Energy or Energy Exeter network. And it's unclear to me what depth Exeter City Council have been involved in the scrutiny of this, because, my point earlier was just a nice polite point about scrutiny, not about timesheets. I haven't heard a compelling reason to choose this site. Just my view. We've heard about the water source heat pump not being there, or maybe being there, or 95% being there. We've heard about the likely connection to Viridor Energy Centre. We know it's unlikely that Water Lane will, the Water Lane development will connect. But all these things are not exclusive to this site anyway. We know that there are areas in Marsh Barton site that could be amenable to the harvesting of the waste stream. In fact, it might even be more favourable. And there's some engineering elements about being one side of the rail track or the other that I just haven't heard enough scrutiny on to sell it to me. So that's where I'm coming from. I think Marsh Barton as a site for the hub would have, to my mind, have many of the advantages of Grace Road Plainfield site. I think I've sort of touched on them, but I think the element of the sequential test has not with not any formal approaches to landowners, that's a real issue for me. You know, if I was to say, right, we need to buy food in Exeter at good prices, it's a cost of living crisis, which it is. I want to build a supermarket there. It's a nice central location. It's good access for people. I would hope you would turn around and say, not on your Nelly. What, absolutely not. There's got to be a compelling reason that we're building on this green space, and it's because it's a one energy center. It's an energy hub. Well, what I've not heard is why this spot? Why not Marsh Barton? The engineering hasn't been spelled out for me. And here's where I'd leave it. I feel this is a great project. It might be in the wrong place. I might be wrong, but it might be in the wrong place. The sequential test is the key material issue here. I don't feel there's been a demonstration that it's been done robustly. I don't hear a compelling reason to see that energy hubs has to be on this site. My view is you can't concrete over nature to save the environment, or if you do, you have to show a very robust case. I'd like to see the sequential test scrutinised. I don't think that's an unreasonable ask. Should that be the planning inspectorate? That is the key question in front of us today. I think the application stands on flimsy evidence, or if the evidence is good, it's not been shown. I think it needs full scrutiny with a full review of the sequential test. One last comment, thank you. One last comment I will make is there's been a whole talk about biodiversity, and is this a material consideration for the site? I think it doesn't take a huge leap of imagination to say, we want to improve biodiversity on that site. Let's crack on. What's stopping us? It could easily be done, but by putting an industrial site in the middle of that area, removes some of that opportunity. So that's very clear. So let us not conflate biodiversity as an excuse to do this project at this site. Let us choose the right place to have this hub. And if the committee think it's a Gracefield Plainfields, I respect that. But I just feel this needs further scrutiny with regards to the sequential test. And that's why I'll be voting against, because I have not heard that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Getchin. Again, I'll just remind all members to please respect others when they're speaking. Thank you very much. Before I hand over to the Director, does anybody else wish to contribute to the debate? Director.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the part when I attempt to sum up everything that we've heard this evening. There's been some really rich debate. It's a complex scheme and lots of great points raised, lots of points of, I think, uncertainty as well. So I want to try and clarify a few things, and I will touch on the sequential test that's just been raised there. So I think first thing to say is that it's a strategic piece of infrastructure. And if it was built, it would strengthen Exeter's role as a leader in sustainable development and climate action. And in terms of what I've heard and what I've heard you say and what the comments have been from the public, that no one's arguing against the public benefits of this scheme and what the energy centre would bring in terms of enabling a district heating network for the city. What's been debated seemingly is the location and whether these buildings could be put somewhere else, frankly. And what's triggered that, I think, what I've heard is that because this is in the Valley Park and it would result in the loss of open space. So that's the issue I'm going to focus on. In terms of the energy centre then, it's very clear that it will be a critical component of an energy network. In fact, without the energy centre, you don't have a district heating network. It's as simple as that. What that heat network would do, though, is supply heat to hospitals, to educational campuses like the university and the college. So really important public services that have a ambition, like the city councils, to decarbonise their heat and contribute to the city's overall net zero ambition. So that's what the energy centre will help deliver as a piece of infrastructure. So One Energy have chosen the site, not the city council. One Energy has chosen Grace Roads, Plainfields as a site that they want to deliver their energy centre. And it's like any other applicant or any other application. It's up to them to choose where they want to do their development. It's not up to the city council. We can guide that through policies and consideration. We do have a very up-to-date policy on this site, which does actually allow for energy as well as nature conservation. That's the Water Lane SPD that was approved last year, so it's bang up to date. Just very clearly, as Howard showed in his presentation, shows the use of an energy centre on this site, or at least an energy use on this site. So we've also heard that something about the sequential test and the fact that there were over 20 sites considered. Now, the sequential test is a very specific thing. It's to do with flood risk. It's not to do with whether it's right to locate any given development in a location. It's simply to say, are there any other better sites that would result in less flooding or aren't subject to flooding? That's all it does. So what they've shown through their 20-cent site assessment is there isn't another site that they've looked at that would be more preferable in terms of flood risk. That's all it does. So it's really important to understand that. So what I would then suggest is what you then need to look at is the merits of the scheme and whether, based on the merits of the scheme, whether this is a suitable site or not whether it's passed or failed the sequential test. In actual fact, it's very clear from the officer's assessment and from the advice of the Environment Agency that it has passed the sequential test. But the real question for you is whether this is an appropriate site in any event, because it does result in the loss of open space. And we know, and I know as a strategic director, that's a major concern, always will be a major concern for members. So it's really important that we understand that issue in a little bit more detail. So we've heard that it's part of the Valley Park. We've also heard that the last use of the site, which was only 2 or 3 years ago, was as a compound for the construction of the railway station. In fact, a large part of the front end of the site was used, and it was even shown on the photograph. In fact, that was the area that some of the representations have talked about being most important in terms of access to the Valley Park. So it's been used for non-open space use in the recent past. In terms of its original use as a playing field and as a sports pitch, it hasn't been used like that for over a decade. And because of that, it's no longer considered in terms of the policies as being an issue, because it's no longer in use and never has been for a considerable period of time as a playing pitch. What we have heard, though, is there's lots of interest on the nearby Bromlands farm site. That's recently been put back into playing field use, and there's a lot of interest in developing that even further. So if your concern is about loss of playing fields, perhaps that's the area to look at and see whether there can be some plans and improvements for that. But it's also very clear that because this site is no longer considered as a playing pitch, it's not possible to gain improvements and Section 6 contributions from this development in that regard. We've also heard about the condition of the site, and there are a couple of really important points I think there to highlight. What One Energy have done, though, is recognise that there is potential landscape and ecological value in improving the site compared to what it is at the moment. So what it is at the moment is, to use the technical term, is modified grassland, and it's in poor condition. And I think we've heard from a number of people now that it's potentially or in the main, it's used by dog walkers. We also have heard and seen the plans. There's some very tall trees that run along the boundary, and they lie outside the application site, so they would be largely unaffected, but they would hide the building. In fact, they already hide the Viridor building, which is a much bigger and more substantial structure than what this one would be. And I think the artist's impression that we saw shows that in very clear terms, really. I have to say as well, this would be nothing like the size of the Civic Centre. So no need to worry on that account. What Energy presented and what we've considered as office is that, notwithstanding the condition of the site and the fact that it's in the Valley Park, they have proposed some significant enhancements, both to quality and accessibility of the open space, far in excess of what currently exists, but also significantly exceeding any statutory requirements that there are for things like biodiversity net gain. So when you look at the plan, as I know you have, the Energy Centre actually takes up only a third of the application site, leaving the majority of the site of the land within the red line for landscaping and biodiversity net gain. So that's how you get to the 50%, 57% net gain, because they're using the majority of the site for that purpose. Now, in terms of the positioning of that building within the site, you've also heard a very clear rationale for that. If we move the building towards the railway line, that would increase flooding on the railway line. So it's clearly a rational judgment there. In terms of then the ecological impact, the loss of open space, the loss of trees, there are going to be upwards of 30 trees planted compared to the loss of 3. What the officers are saying very clearly is that those harms have been mitigated. There's still a harm, there's still a loss, no question about that, of open space, but we feel that has been more than adequately mitigated. So the final piece of the jigsaw then is about, well, what's left outside the application site. So what One Energy have also demonstrated, they've looked beyond that. They want to enhance the rest of the site, the rest of the area, sorry, for public open space and for biodiversity net gain. So they've submitted some, I think, really exciting illustrations of what is possible outside of the application site, with some proposals for creating new habitats, but also maximising people's interaction with nature. Now that, as we've heard, that would all be secured through this planning permission, through Section 106 agreement. So it's a wonderful opportunity, if you like, to consider that, in addition to what, if you like, the planning rules would suggest, and certainly in terms of biodiversity net gain, what they would have to do. So overall, then, the officer's assessment, our assessment, is that this would accord with the most recent planning policy, the adopted Water Lane SPD. It would also, in our view, reconcile all the other relevant considerations, including the loss of open space, because they've been mitigated sufficiently to outweigh the harm. So just to conclude then, and I think we have heard this as well, is that these opportunities don't come along very often. This does feel and seem like the ideal site for this. It meets all the requirements that you would want to meet in terms of that future-proofing of an energy centre, to take into account opportunities that will come into the future, but also the immediate opportunities in terms of being sufficient land and space to take into account the air source heat pumps, but also that opportunity to take heat from its neighbour, the Viridor energy from waste plant. So in many respects then, it's a unique opportunity. It's perhaps a once in a lifetime opportunity, both to meet the city's net zero ambitions, but also to really maximise space and help with that nature conservation aspect as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. If I could ask you to switch the presentation to the officer recommendation, please. And members, if you want to see it in writing, it's page 42 of your documents. And I'm going to call for a motion based on the officer recommendation, which is that we accept the recommendation. Do I have a seconder, please, for that? I saw straight out Councillor Atkinson. Okay, with a seconder in place, I'm going to ask for an indicative vote. Will those in favour of this recommendation please raise their hand? And those against, please raise. I think there's no abstentions. Okay, on that vote, this application is agreed. Agenda item 6 is planning decisions made and withdrawn applications between the 17th of the 4th, 2025 and the 15th of the 7th, 2025. Do any members have questions for the Director on those? Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Chair. If I may, I'll address the questions to the Director.
Yeah, just indicate either the page number
Yeah,
or
I
the
will.
application number.
Yeah. So there's it's actually a number of pages that all come within the same question. So page 83 and page 84. As one of the ward councillors for Pennsylvania, something that residents ask us regularly, and I'm taking this opportunity therefore to ask you so that I can pass on some sort of answer to our residents. There are questions around the multiple occupation planning and how those decisions are made in terms of to what extent is the impact on existing infrastructure considered when giving planning approval to increase the number of occupants in an HMO or the number of HMOs? Is that a planning matter? And if so, is the criteria available for residents in some sort of public format on the website to be able to see how and why those decisions are being made? Because I think in Pennsylvania particularly, there are questions being raised at the impact of an increase in HMO. So if you have a property that is for 5 people, and now after an application to yourselves or ourselves, it's now a house for 7 people, to what extent are you considering those extra 2 people and the impact those extra 2 people are going to have on the street in terms of parking, refuse collection, sewerage, you name it? Like, residents raise that question. And similarly, as a resident of St. David's Ward, similar question.
Are you going to take that, or do you want to ignore it, Lance?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Hughes. And you're absolutely correct that all of those issues do impact on how we consider applications for HMOs, and they're all valid issues, and also the overall issue about concentration. So not just an individual, but the sort of cumulative impact, and that's probably the bigger issue actually, rather than the individual thing. So there's two sort of tools that we have to consider. The first one is there is an Article 4 direction that we've just extended. When I say just, it was the beginning of the year, extended that to a wider geography. So I'll have to look at the map to be absolutely clear where that HMO extends. But within that boundary, what the Article 4 direction does is prohibit the conversion of property to HMOs without planning, because some aspects this don't require planning. So if somebody comes forward with a proposal and it's within the Article 4, they need to apply for planning. In applying for planning permission in any respect, whether it's within or outside an Article 4 direction, there's also we've also published an SPD, supplementary planning document, which sets out all the detailed criteria. So anybody that wants to understand how we assess these proposals, just look through the SPD. It's on our website. It was updated at the same time that we extended the Article 4 direction. But without looking, I can absolutely confirm that all of those issues that you mentioned are definitely relevant to that.
That's a fantastic answer. Thank you, Director.
Anybody have any more quick questions on the applications? Yes. Sorry.
Microphone, please. On page 73, a second application down, there was the Exeter Boxing Martial Arts Centre in Beacon Lake. I just think in the proposal at the end of line 1, the is not required. It only doesn't add and confuses the issue totally. And when you've got the decision type, it looks like they were applying for permission. Did they need to have prior permission to demolish something? You're saying prior permission, prior approval required, and then refused. So I'm totally confused of whether they were asking for, did they need permission to knock it down? And you're saying, yes, you need permission to knock it down, etc. Or they have applied to knock it down and you've refused to knock it down. It is slightly confusing the language there. Second one down on page 73.
One down.
Yeah, just rather quickly the long number.
Marty, I've got you. Right. I just have to read it first.
Yes. As I say, I think that comes out at the end of the first line. That makes sense then.
Okay, so I can understand the confusion. It's the way these are set, the terminology. So first thing to point out is that this isn't a planning application. What they're seeking is whether we would require them to go through a formal approval process because it's deemed to be not development that requires planning permission. So in considering that, we have two choices. We can either allow that for the prior approval process or not allow it and effectively refuse the scheme. So that's what's happened in that case, basically. So we've determined that shouldn't go through the prior approval process.
We've got to apply. There's two questions being answered. The first is, do we need permission? So do we need prior approval? Because we can just say no, you don't. We've said yes, you do need prior approval. Oh, and by the way, we refuse it. So it's two. Yeah. Well, we've.
Thank you, Councillor Harding.
Thank you very much. Page 60, please. The last one on the page there is to refuse planning permission to prune a tree that overhangs someone's garden. Can I just ask why that was refused? I thought normally the rule is that if it's overhanging your garden, you can prune it back, but in this case it's no. Or is it to do with the fact that the crowns, they want to cut the crown off as well? Thank you.
Just let me find it first.
Yeah, the last one on page 60.
It's a TPO. Yeah.
The Dawlish Road one?
Yes.
Just let me read it.
Oh, thank you.
So I think what it's saying there is that they haven't given sufficient justification for doing those works to the tree, and it was refused. It's a TPO, so because it's a TPO, it needs planning permission. That's what a TPO means. Because normally you can do works to a tree without that. So you happy with that?
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. I think there's two principles here. One is that it's a TPO, so you need permission to do the work. And then the other one is ownership. So because if it's on your side of the boundary, you can prune it, but you need permission from the council if it's TPO. So there's two principles there. One's a tree that might be overhanging a boundary. And if it wasn't a TPO tree, legally, those bits are yours. And I think the principle is you have to return the branches as well. You have to offer them. So that's the principle of ownership. And then the TPO means you need consent to do works to the trees, and they're effectively two separate things.
Oh, but can I just ask, but why was that likely to have been refused? Because why can't they trim the branch that goes over their garden?
Yeah, so I can't find, it won't let me access the report. We can
Oh.
get back to you on that.
Is that all right? Oh, thank you very much.
I'll get back to you on that.
Yeah, so obviously what will happen then is there'll be a tree officer's report. And so you'll get copied into that, right? Okay, Councillor Pole.
Yeah, I was just really interested to see in the report on the Exmouth Junction Gateway, page number 83 at the top, that travel pack has been developed for Exmouth Junction Gateway at Prince Charles Road. And there's interested to see in that travel pack that there's a Co-Wheels Car Club vehicle coming to that development. And this seemed like quite an exciting sort of straw in the wind. And I just wondered whether that, what the sort of scope was for sort of looking at that provider for potentially for sort of, other sites. I don't know if that's a relevant question.
So what that is, it's an application to discharge a condition on a planning permission. So there's a condition on the Exmouth Junction Gateway site to provide those facilities, and what they've done is apply. It's a sort of application you have to go through to submit the information that allows us to discharge the condition or not. So it's worth pointing out that these are all on the delegation sheet. You can see why they're on the delegation sheet. These aren't matters that we would normally bring to the planning commission, because you'd be here a long time and there will be lots of meetings. But these are all standard conditions, certainly for residential. So we'd always look to put those conditions on, significant. This is a major. The Exmouth Junction Gateway is a major development, over 100 units, Howard. It's big, so you'd have these schemes, these conditions, normally.
I just it would worth commenting really that it's exciting to have a car share facility coming forward in one of these new developments.
Okay, so obviously this is quite an exciting development that members have been reading through the delegated briefing things there and testing the officers. I'm glad to see that, but I think we still got one from Councillor Robson, have we? Yes.
I'm really sorry. Pages 100 and 101. I'm just interested in there's two actually that say split decision. And again, can you just explain what that's? It's the one land on the west side of Cliffs Road, and the other one is land at the corner of Retreat Drive. If it's a not now answer, I'm happy to take it by email.
I'm not familiar with this one, but normally a split decision, the planning legislation allows us to approve certain parts of, but not other parts of it. That's normally what a split decision means. I'm not involved in this one. So which one is it again?
No, it's more just the
general.
Whether that is,
The concept of the split decision.
It just happens.
Yeah.
In my ward, but that wasn't my opinion. It was just that concept of it. So
it's like a partial approval, really.
Partial approval.
Yeah.
Rather than. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's quite rare that we do.
Yeah.
That.
Well, just because there were two sort of on the same page.
Maybe not that rare.
Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you very much, members. If there's no more questions on appeals, we'll move on to agenda item 7. Sorry, on delegations. Now we move on to item 7, which is the appeals. Are there any comments, Councillor Mitchell?
Just a question of welcome. Normally we get an account by the officer of an appeal one, and I'm just interested in the first one that happens to be in St James, which was the adult gaming centre in Sidwell Street. If you remember, we turned down, lost an appeal. These people have never lost an appeal yet. It was interesting that the heading you've now got, learning from future decisions. which is most helpful, showing areas that should be looked at in relation to similar. Who drafts it? Has that come from the inspector's content of the report or the officer's summary of what the inspector was leading to? So I'm not clear where that has come. It also appears in another one later on. I just wonder, it's helpful. I just wonder where did it come from? Page 113. Sorry.
So I think what we like to do is, you know, when we've had any appeal decision, it's always a rich form of information for learning, and whichever outcome. So we just try and list those issues really, that what went into the decision that the inspectorate made, so we can understand that for future reference. That's really what that's about. So it's just kind of list. So it's saving you the trouble of going through the whole appeal process yourself, reading all the background information, our statement, the appellant's statement, and then the final letter from the inspector. It's just a summary really of what we've gleaned from that particular decision. I'm not sure about that, but
Right. Okay. One thing that I'd like to note is how many of the appeals were dismissed, indicating that the officers and we as a committee are in general heading in the correct direction in terms of making decisions. And I congratulate you all on that. That saying, I believe we've come to the final item on the agenda, which is the date of the next meeting, which I've now managed to misplace. When are we? Is it September the 8th? Okay, so I look forward to seeing you all in this happy place on September the 8th. I thank you all very much indeed. It was really obvious from this evening that a lot of attention had been made to the documentation, that a lot of time had been taken in preparing responses, and I really appreciate the comments from everybody in directing us towards a decision, not necessarily one which obviously we all agree with, but the things there. Councillor Ketchin.
Just like to say, I think that the meeting in its new format went very well. We all had a tendency to overrun. The chair handled that well, and it's not even 8 o'clock.
Thank you very much, Councillor. With that, the meeting is closed. Thank you.